Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 248. I'm the host, Kyle Lanslone. On today's show, the great Scott Horton returns. He's the editorial director of antiwar.com, the director of the Libertarian Institute, the host of the Scott Horton Show, and the author of Fool's Errand, Enough Already, and The Great Ron Paul. Scott is back on the show today to talk about the war in Ukraine. I know everybody is going to want to hear and share what Scott is saying, so find the show either at the Libertarian Institute, at antiwar.com, or on YouTube, Rumble, Odysee for video version. You can follow the show on Facebook or Twitter. The Twitter handle is @con_interest. And then you can donate directly to the show at Patreon, Subscribestar, or through crypto. Of course, me and Scott both work at the Libertarian Institute and antiwar.com, so that's a great way to support us as well. Another way you could support the show, and this way you get some benefit for yourself, is by doing your CBD shopping at Paloma Verde, PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Promo code PEACE. They'll save you 20% when you spend $75 or more. They have a great selection of high quality CBD products at Paloma Verde. My personal favorites are the topicals, though. I really like the sports cream. It's got a great smell, it works fast, and it relieves pain for quite a long period of time, hours. So PalomaVerdeCBD.com. They have, again, check out the website. They have all the products that you could ever want, CBD, any kind of, different form, whether it's the soft gel, the gummy, the extract, even products for your dog. But again, my personal favorites are the topicals. And do your CBD shopping there. Use the promo code, help the show, help out yourself. All right, here's an interview with Scott Horton. Hey, Scott, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Kyle. Thanks for having me again.
Happy to have you on, and somewhat stressful here because I want to talk to you about the situation in Ukraine. And the last time I had you on the show, I did ask if you thought Russia would invade, and at the time you had said no. And I guess I'm just curious as to why you think that Putin invaded, because there's a lot of people, even some people, within kind of our anti-war community, that think that Putin may have reached a stage of irrationality or something like that. So do you see, some reasons behind, not justifications, but reasons behind his invasion, or is this, Putin gone crazy?
Yeah, well, there are reasons behind it. It may very well have been a bad calculation by him in terms of the payoff and the gain. But I think he knew very well what he was getting into. And if you read his declarations of war from February the 21st and the 24th, he lays out a solid case for what he's doing. And, to make myself very clear again, I'm not saying it was reasonable justification for war, but I'm saying it was absolutely a rational case for what he was upset about, what he thought the security threats were, and why he was determined to do something about it. And essentially, the logic is no different than the Niet means Niet memo, or his speeches in 2004 and 2007 and I guess 15, and whenever, all these speeches that he's given at the Munich Security Conference and other places, where he's just warning that NATO is a military alliance and he has to treat it as such. And you guys swear to God that you're just our friends and you're just spreading peace and security and stability. But man, sure looks like a military alliance aimed at us from here. And so what the hell, man, back off. And there's the same thing for a very long time. Now, there are a few reasons I didn't think that he was going to invade. One of them was because it was apparent just how costly it would be for Russia to do this. That, the U.S. Treasury Department, never even mind if you get the British and the French and the Germans and the Japanese and everybody else to agree with you, but just the U.S. Treasury Department alone can destroy your country. They have the ability to put sanctions on people in a way to just shut down commerce. So, for something like this, it wasn't too much of a stretch to see that America would be able to unite all of its allies in an economic war and all these kinds of things. Now, I thought Richard Hanania made a really good point that, man, if you're going to kick Russia out of SWIFT, you should have made that clear up front that that would be one of the consequences. Instead, it's more like an emotional reaction after the fact that it happened. Oh no, we're going to kick. Now we're going to punish you by, we're going to come up with things to do to you or whatever. Instead of, really delineating all the reasons why they ought to feel deterred. Um, you know, but then, I think also I think the major reason that I overlooked it is because I really wasn't looking at how badly the Americans were licking their chops at their so-called Plan B here. Now, maybe it was Plan A. I don't know. I don't have really any evidence that it was Plan A other than, my suspicions. But we have direct evidence that it's Plan B, not C or D or E, but, which you would think Plan B would be if there is a war, that it would be, well, diplomacy and trying to figure out a way to come to a ceasefire as soon as possible. But they seem to really be licking their chops, anticipating the ability to give the Russians another Afghanistan war. Just as they said in Afghanistan, we'll give the Russians their own Vietnam, which is this horrible no-win quagmire that we should not have done to ourselves and the poor Vietnamese. And so if that so-called self-inflicted wound was so bad for us, we would replicate it against the Soviets in Afghanistan. As they said from before the war started, that was their goal. And then that was what they did. They helped the Mujahideen and the Arab Afghan army to bleed the Soviet Union dry, and was one of the straws that broke the camel's back at the fall of the Soviet Union. And so this is, as I've been telling y'all, sorry, I'm dying. As I've been telling y'all for 15 years, 20, that this is all bin Laden wanted to do, was to replicate America's war in Afghanistan and get us to make that same mistake again. Now the Americans are saying, we want to do like we did to the Russians in Afghanistan. Now you don't hear them say, we want to do what the Taliban just did to us in Afghanistan, right? They don't ever admit that part of it. They want to go back to the 80s and go, oh yeah, that worked so well. As Hillary Clinton said, yeah, there were some unintended consequences from that. But anyway, man, it worked great. And the thing that's really got me is in just seeing the quantity of news stories going back to last fall where they were talking about this, many of which I had missed. David Ignatius, the CIA's spokesman at the Washington Post, had written a couple of things about it that had gone over my head, and a couple of others that I just didn't know about. There was that one CIA story in Yahoo News by Zach Dorfman, which had its big follow-up yesterday about the CIA training there. But the thing is, I keep finding now this cliche, well, we might not know anything about defeating an insurgency, but we sure know how to support one, like we did in Afghanistan and Iraq, which, boy, isn't that counter to all the hype from 2009 about why we had to triple the Afghan war because David Petraeus and James Mattis had rewritten the counterinsurgency manual, and now they knew exactly what to do to defeat an insurgency. Just give us another 10 years of war. We promise it'll be perfect. Let's give us another 70,000 men. It'll work great, they said. The masters of coin, the coin Denistas, they were called. Now, oh yeah, insurgency? Nah, we don't know how to beat one of those. Never mind. Kelly Vlahos was right. Screw us. But you know what we can do? We can put missiles in the hands of jihadists and Nazis and hope that they point them the right direction. And it's awesome. We're so good at that. Look at our wonderful success in Syria. They actually invoked not just Afghanistan, but Syria. Now, Afghanistan, you could say, well, that was back there in the days of McDonough and Michael Jackson and Hawk versus the Soy and just ancient history, man, 1980s. But Syria, that was just 10 years ago. That was Obama and Biden's absolute worst treason, their absolute worst policy of their entire presidency that led to the rise of the Islamic State Caliphate and then Iraq War III to destroy it again. And they go, yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll back the insurgency like we did in Afghanistan that led to the rise of al-Qaeda in the first place. And like we did in Syria that led to al-Qaeda in Iraq actually succeeding and creating their own state for 3 years. Brilliant. And absolutely just shameless, these people. And no shame whatsoever. Like, what a great opportunity to do this. But not in Afghanistan, but 4,000 miles west in Ukraine, in Europe. And not just jihadists, because there are jihadists there. Not just jihadists, but also literal Hitler-loving Nazis. And not just TOW missiles, but javelins and stingers. And these people are crazy, man. They could get us into a nuclear war here. And I really think that, their idea was, well, we'll try to dissuade Putin from invading, but we're not going to get it on any reasonable terms. And if he does invade, oh well. In fact, check out this one I found yesterday, Kyle. Someone was passing this around on Twitter. Someone was trashing Chomsky for citing me, saying, I think maybe they wanted this to happen. And some other guy said, well, I don't know. That's not so crazy, because here's this one in the Wall Street Journal. That's not it. I have way too many Wall Street Journal stories here. Hang on. I'm going to find it for you. Here you go. The strategic case for risking war in Ukraine. This is from December the 22nd by John R. Denny. The strategic case for risking war in Ukraine. An invasion would be a diplomatic, economic, and military mistake for Putin. Let him make it if he must. And so you see these people who care to claim so much about the people of Ukraine. To them, the people of Ukraine are just so much cannon fodder to be sacrificed in their larger geopolitical strategy. And also my new friend Daryl Cooper, Martyr Made on Twitter, Jocko Willings, right-hand guy. He had this great tweet. Great thread. I just retweeted it late last night. You can find it toward the top of my feed right now, Kyle. And it's his tweet thread breaking down that Rand Corporation study about how we can keep sticking it to the Russians and we can get them. It's from 2017, and it's saying, or was it 19? There's two different ones. I forget which one is which, but it's saying we got to step up our support for the terrorists in Syria. We got to put pressure on, try to overthrow the government of Belarus again. We got to increase arms to Ukraine. We got to increase agitation against Russia's friends in Central Asia, like in Kazakhstan. We got to add all these sanctions, all these things, the whole list. This is what they've done. This is the whole list through the Trump years and into the Biden years. And as I know from, it was Dave DeCamp, I'm pretty sure at antiwar.com, was quoting the Military Times, saying that Biden increased American naval and air harassment of the Russians by 125% in his first year in office, in terms of sailing our military fleet into the Black Sea and harassing them in the Baltic Sea and bomber flights off of their coasts.
Yeah.
Same policy all along. As Biden said, nothing fundamental will change. That's because nothing fundamental had changed when Trump took over from Obama. The state just made sure of it. Even where he really wanted to make the change. Remember, he tried to pull our troops out of Syria 3 different times and was told no and overruled by his supposed inferiors at the Pentagon.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there I want to follow up on you with, but on that last point, remember too, the HMS Defender sailed through Russian territorial waters over the last summer. I mean, they were really trying to push Putin in this area.
And this is a major exercise last July.
Yeah.
This needs a whole paragraph in my speech I'm working on. This mini book I'm working on now is definitely that. In fact, I think I got the Biden's meeting with Putin last July, but I forgot the exercises. I need that in there.
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to ask you about, or I guess go back to on the sanctions question, but overall, I think maybe on the Russian invasion. And again, this isn't to justify the Russian invasion because it's absolutely horrible. But at the same time, if you are sitting in Moscow and you are a general advising Vladimir Putin on what the best thing for Russian military strategy is, I don't know if you could ever say that it'll be more opportune for Russia to do something in Ukraine than at the present, because the U.S. was just flooding in weapons. And if you look at how sanctions work in the U.S. on Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, it really doesn't matter. Sanctions are political. The American people understand nothing about foreign policy in enough detail to understand why the U.S. is sanctioning various countries, right? We had crippling sanctions on Maduro, and now we're going to remove them just because we dislike Putin more. What? So he's not treating his people any better, but now it's okay to do business with the guy? It's obviously all a fraud, right? And nobody understands what the sanctions are there for in the first place anyways. And so if you're Russia and they're seriously talking about shutting off Nord Stream, or, blocking Nord Stream 2, kicking you out of Swift, you just assess that one day that's going to be the truth. And so you might as well do it now when, the US can't completely cut you off from China and Iran and India and other countries. I mean, even I think Turkey's going to keep trading with Russia. And so
Right.
it's not nearly as isolated as the Biden administration pretends. And so, if the U.S. really was going to push a war, in some ways, it, I guess, kind of not made sense. But, you understand that cold rational calculation as to why Putin chose to do it when he did, which was just there's going to be no better time because they're only going to have more weapons in Ukraine. They're only going to have more ability to sanction the Russian economy.
Right. Well, the New York Times said in their article where they talk about Plan A and Plan B, they say that, well, listen, the arms shipments to Ukraine are very carefully calibrated to deter Russia without serving as a casus belli and the excuse for them to actually attack. Well, either they calibrated it to make sure that Russia would attack by increasing the amount of arms to the point where they knew that, and according to the Washington Post, it's more than $3 billion over the past 7 years, something like that, worth of weapons. I'm sure it's far higher than that, actually. But either they calibrated it to provoke an invasion, or they really suck at calibrating deterrence. Either way, those weapons did not deter Russia from invading. They provoked an invasion, and absolutely are part of it. And that's the calculation. It's like, well, how many more weapons am I supposed to sit here and watch you arm them with before we go to war anyway? Might as well invade now as opposed to later. So as you're saying, with the economic war and the price that they're paying for all that, that won't dissuade them, but it might provoke them. Well, whatever. We're going to face an economic war either way. They're betting we're not going to touch them militarily. I hope they're right about that. And so, yeah, logically speaking, we're talking about descriptive, not normative here. It makes sense for them to have at least taken the Donbass, I guess, or, to try to make a big move like that. But, if you read that statement, you read his declarations of war of the 21st and the 24th, this makes it absolutely clear. It's intolerable that Ukraine would be an American satellite on Russia's border. I see all the time people say, even libertarians, saying, nuh-uh, it's not NATO expansion that caused this to happen. It's NATO expansion that's preventing it from happening to Poland and the Baltics and everybody else. And that if only we brought Ukraine in sooner, then this wouldn't have happened, and that kind of thing. And this is just self-serving crap, right? Like it's a great way to try to erase America's role in putting the Russians into that situation. But that's exactly what they're doing, right? I mean, that's what the Niet means Niet memo says, is Lavrov says, listen, you guys try to bring Ukraine into NATO, it could cause a civil war. And then we might have to intervene. And we don't want to. So just back off, man. And then we won't have to have this conflict. It's the same thing. And people say, oh, no, this is just a rationale, a rationalization. Putin is determined, first and foremost, and only, all he cares about is to reincorporate all Russian speakers into the Russian Federation and then maybe recreate the old Russian Empire or even recreate the Soviet Empire and all of these things. It's like, you know what? That may very well be something he would like to do someday. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Mearsheimer that quoted him saying, anyone who doesn't miss the Soviet Union, and he's not talking about communism, but he's talking about Russia's power at the height of the USSR. Anyone who does not miss the Soviet Union has no heart, he said. But anyone who wants it back has no brain. There's nothing. What are they going to do about it? And so if he really, really, really always wanted to just reincorporate Eastern Ukraine, then the Americans essentially have been acting as his agents, writing up the script of his justification to do so. That's about everything other than just we love ethnic Russians. He's citing direct security threats to Russia. I don't know, like, the whole deep history of the Russian nation and all this stuff. But I do know they've been invaded over and over and over again, countless times by, obviously the Nazis and the British and the Americans, in fact, invaded them after the Russian Revolution. Napoleon and for that matter, Genghis Khan coming from the other direction, and whoever. They've been invaded over and over and over again, and all the Vikings and whoever else, rolling through Far Eastern Europe there. And if you look at Russia's borders, they have no mountains or rivers or hills or valleys or anything to serve as a physical barrier to Moscow. It's essentially open plains all the way to the capital city, right? So they have reason to be paranoid in a way that we just don't. More than 30 million people died, and Soviets died in World War II fighting the Germans. Half of all the casualties from the entire war pretty much were Soviets fighting Nazis in that war. They lost 300,000 people, Kyle, defending the Crimean Peninsula from Hitler, from the Germans and the Romanians who were trying to take Crimea. 300,000 men. And that was not that long ago. Now, that's essentially our casualties from the entire war in World War II. It was 400,000 from the entire war. And that's how much they lost just trying to hang on to Crimea. And I'm a Texan. I can tell you for real how much the Alamo means to Texans, especially people who their family has been here for generations. People really care a lot. But that was like, what, 35 men or something got killed there? 60? Imagine if we had lost 300,000 men trying to hang on to the Alamo. Just what kind of emotional reaction that would be gotten out of that, messing with Americans, the Anglos' dominance of Texas. There's just no way. I mean, forget it. Nobody's going to take Texas from us as it is. They sure as hell wouldn't do it if our, civic religion had included sacrifices like that,
Mm-hmm.
and then just to the sources of Russian conduct here, they have every reason to be terrified that they have no cushion. I mean, why did Stalin keep all of Eastern Europe? Was it because he believed in Marxism so strongly he wanted to spread the ideology to the world? Hell no. He was creating a giant buffer for the Russian Empire. Like, it was the commie Soviet Empire, but it was a Russian-dominated empire. And he was keeping Eastern Europe to keep the Germans out, to create as big of a cushion as he possibly could to keep, the Western powers from invading again. Now Putin is complaining in that speech, look, Gorbachev gave our cushion away, all of it. And he goes, I'm paraphrasing, but something like, well, so that's the situation we're stuck with. Ukraine was independent. So what's going to happen? Well, the reality is, evidently, there's no such thing as Ukrainian independence. They're either going to belong to Russia or they're going to belong to the United States of America. And right now, Ukraine is an American colony, he said, with a puppet regime. Well, that's just true. That's 100% true, stated fact. Sorry. You can hold elections all day when you exclude the eastern half of the country who had voted for the guy that you overthrew in the last bloody coup. And then you get to hold new elections among only you and your friends and claim that that's a democratic, government there and all of this. It's completely corrupt and completely wrong. It is a colony. As, again, Derek Cooper pointed out, I had forgotten about this. You can go and find footage of Joe Biden, the vice president of the United States, banging the gavel and sitting in the speaker's chair running the Ukrainian parliament after the coup.
Oh, man.
So when Putin says the Americans are reducing Ukraine to a sock puppet regime and they're threatening to militarize it and threaten our capital city from there, that's pretty much right. And the Americans insist all along, this has nothing to do with Russia. This helps keep the peace between the Czechs and the Slovaks, as long as we got everybody involved in one big military alliance together. That's all. Just the same way Texas and Oklahoma don't fight, because we're all part of one big armed forces together. That's all we're trying to do here. This isn't pointed at them. Really, then how come we overthrow the government of Serbia and Georgia and Tajikistan and tried Belarus twice, succeeded in Ukraine twice? How come we continually work behind the scenes through the CIA and the NED to overthrow any government friendly to Russia. And then talk about bringing them openly, like Ukraine and Georgia, openly talk about bringing them into our military alliance. Like, seriously, man, let's say, Kyle, that they had a meeting at a think tank in D.C. And then, say, Robert Kagan's wife got up there and said, hey, everybody, we love Russia. This isn't about Russia. We're just trying to create peace and security and stability everywhere we spread our security umbrella. And we don't mean Russia any harm at all. And then what if the whole think tank crowd said, yeah, that's right, Victoria Nuland. We all like Russia. This is about keeping the peace between Slovakia and Slovenia, man. That's all by integrating them together under our military force so that they don't fight. Everybody knows that this has nothing to do with Russia. And they all agree, Kyle. Okay. Now, what does that mean in Moscow? Just pretend for a moment you're not Putin, but somebody in the national security state in Russia. The Americans swear this isn't about us. They just really, really, really like spreading their military alliance to all of our neighbors right on our borders and overthrowing any government that doesn't want to go along with the program. But they keep promising that this has nothing to do with us. And they keep promising that even though they tore up, and the Russians played their part in this, but still, it was Trump who tore up the INF treaty that kept medium-range missiles out of Europe. So even though the Russians are saying, geez, we're afraid you're going to put medium-range missiles in Ukraine, we just won't listen to that. We'll just pretend that doesn't make any sense and that Putin just wants to reintegrate the Russian-speaking peoples. He's using these missiles as an excuse. But you read the statements, they're just nothing but piles of security concerns. Yep. Like, hi, I'm Vladimir Putin. Today's speech is entitled, Why I'm Declaring War, a list of security concerns I've got. And then he just lists a bunch of security concerns, culminating in, geez, if they put their new kind of medium-range nuclear missiles, ballistic missiles that they're working on, if they were to station those in Kharkiv right now, their flight time to Moscow would be 15 minutes. He said if they put Tomahawk missiles in there, then it would be the flight time to Moscow would be 10 minutes. And if they put their new hypersonic missiles in there, the flight time to Moscow would be less than 5 minutes. It's like a knife to the throat, he said. Now, you can find a think tank full of people in D.C. to say, no, he doesn't even mean that. But, I mean, it sounds like he means it to me. I don't know.
Right. Well, if you listen to,
it's a legitimate concern.
Well, but the problem is, Sky, if you're an American, you just watch the media, they took that speech and they only took the parts of it where Putin was like, Ukraine's not even a real country. I kind of miss the USSR. And that's what they put in front of the American people, where I'm pretty sure that part of the speech was probably for domestic consumption, right? To like invigorate some Russian nationalism. Like, hell yeah, we should go and take that part of Ukraine. Like that was for Russian citizens, where the part that was meant for Americans was him laying out his grievances against America, which didn't get reported at all. And as you say about the control of the Ukrainian government, I mean, just look, the most violent radical groups, as Matt Blumenthal and Alex Rubinstein laid out, have a lot of control over that government. Even, if the people pit Zelensky, who was running on a platform of let's end the conflict in the Donbass, let's, figure out a relationship with Russia, right? He wasn't like necessarily, I think, running as a pro-Russian candidate or anything like that. And I don't know how solid of even political platform he had. I remember one of the first people he picked for a foreign minister was very hawkish, but the neo-Nazis, the violent extremist, most like Western factions are able to move Zelensky in that way. And so I did want to ask you about, the neo-Nazi presence in Ukraine, just because I guess I don't want to overstate it too much, because I do worry that Putin is using it as war propaganda. There are terrorists in the Middle East, but, Biden dropping bombs on people and claiming they're terrorists, I don't believe any of that. And so I don't want to overstate that at all. But at the same time, we have seen cases like with Syria where there were people who just wanted to protest the Assad government, and then the nut jobs came with their, CIA funded weapons, and they went and started killing people and cutting off heads and gained a lot of power that way. And so I don't know if the same dynamics could really play out in Ukraine. I mean, if you look at it, they do have like a massive military of conscripts and just people who want to fight for Ukraine. And then there's like this small subset of Azov, C-14, the right sector. But at the same time, if, this does turn into an insurgency, it does seem in insurgencies, the most ruthless, violent people, also people who are traveling to Ukraine. And me and Will wrote an article this week for the Institute about all these neo-Nazis from all over the place coming to Ukraine. They don't care about the people of Ukraine at all, so they'll set IEDs everywhere. They, you know what I mean? Like, you might not do that in your neighborhood if it's your little kid that's going to maybe walk and get blown up by it. But, if you don't have any family there, you're just some fighter from wherever the hell going because you're a Nazi and you want to kill some Russians or Jews or whatever you want to do, you may be willing to do some pretty violent stuff, and that could, like, in a chaotic situation, help the worst people rise to power.
Yep. I mean, that's really right. I think I don't have any reason to think that the Ukrainian military, command structure at the top is dominated by the Nazis. I guess I don't know, it ain't, but they've been the vanguard of the movement used by the Ukrainian military against the people of the Donbass this whole time, all these years. And I mean, they are really an independent power base. Remember when Zelensky's predecessor, Poroshenko, said, I guess it was when he signed Minsk II or when he actually went to try to implement Minsk II, that the C-14 Nazis and right sector surrounded the parliament and said, remember, we did a coup and put you in power. We could do another coup and take you out. And so, it's like Muqtada al-Sadr, where the government there serves at the pleasure of these warlords. Like, yeah, you're the prime minister, but I'm the one who made you prime minister, that kind of thing. So, they have a real problem with that. There's the famous footage of Zelensky goes to the front and is trying to tell the C-14 Nazis to scale down their violence against the Russians in the Donbass. We've got this Minsk II deal. I'm trying to implement it. And they tell him to go to hell. And he says, listen, I'm the president of this country. I'm 41 years old. I'm not just some loser. And they're like, whatever, loser. You don't get to tell us what to do. He's Jewish and they're Nazis. So you could figure how they don't respect his authority. They're happy to receive his guns and all that. So they're working with him. And as you mentioned, that great Blumenthal and Rubenstein article there is about how, they're essentially Jew washing the Nazi contingent in Ukraine by saying, yeah, but the president's Jewish, so you're not allowed to say anything about what Nazis these guys are, that kind of deal. Although it's really important who they are. And I think the main point being here that the Ukrainian military is doomed, certainly in the east of the country. And if the Russians decide they want to hit it with just even cruise missiles or whatever from a distance and destroy the Ukrainian military in the west, I don't think anybody seriously doubts their ability to do that. People are talking about how much trouble the Russians are having now in the war. And that may be true, but they haven't called out the heavy bombers, have they? They haven't called out really air power at all. So this is more than them fighting with an arm tied behind their back. This is them very deliberately going low and slow and trying to get what they want with the minimal amount of overall damage. Not that I'm saying that they haven't killed civilians. They have. They've killed, according to the UN, more than 500 by now. That was the last numbers I've saw. But I'm just saying, compared to, either Bush's air campaigns against Iraq or something like that, they have not done that. But anyway, comes down to the total destruction of the Ukrainian military and possibly the occupation of the west of the country, especially, then, or even if the west remains independent, but the east is under Russian control, but the military is broken, then yeah, you will see essentially lawless, unorganized, or semi-organized insurgencies backed by the CIA and our allies, waging this stay-behind program type war against the Russians at that point. And then it's just like you say, it's the worst who don't mind dying who are the ones who are the vanguard of an insurgency like that. A professional state army full of conscripts or paid soldiers is one thing, but a volunteer insurgency is essentially the moderates sit at their hotel while the guys who don't mind dying and killing are out there doing the worst of it. And that's the C-14 guys. There's a great quote I read the other day. I think this might be in Blumenthal's article, where the guy says, hey, listen, if we all die killing the Untermenschen and fighting to destroy Russia and break it apart and all of these things, then that's a good death. I don't mind. That's just fine. If I live killing them, then that's even better. But come on, boys, let's go get dead killing Russians, this kind of attitude. Mm-hmm. So, they're very dedicated to their so-called principles, these Nazis, and willing to risk everything for them. So, yeah, I mean, what can you say, man? This is supposedly the justification for the entire American empire in the first place, is we single-handedly beat Hitler. Never mind what the Soviets did.
Right.
And that's how you know that we're always the good guys. And that's how you know that we're always doing the right thing, is because we beat the Nazis. And now they want to just go, yeah, okay, there are some Nazis, but anyway, the larger point is Putin is really evil and bad. Like, yeah, I don't know, man. I can't, if you go back to the war in Syria, the war in Yemen, the State Department, according to the New York Times, but actually I think the AP covered this too. I think there's multiple sources about this, that at the State Department, the lawyers had written memos to the boss saying, sir, we're afraid we could go to prison for war crimes in Yemen, because the way that we're providing arms and intelligence to the Saudis legally makes us a co-belligerent. And the Saudis are committing war crimes with our weapons. So please be advised, sir, that your lawyers are warning you that we're afraid that we could go to prison for what we're doing here. It's against the law. And then those memos just stayed in a desk. And of course, the Department of Justice would let any government employee murder anyone they want and would never hold anyone accountable ever. That's the deal when you join government. The Justice Department passes you a license to lie and murder, and then you do whatever you want and die happy of old age. That's the deal. But which is kind of funny, right? Like, here these lawyers are smart enough to go, man, we're breaking the law. But they're not smart enough to know that, oh, well, whatever. It's not like we don't all have letters of immunity that say we can do whatever we want. They have virtual ones. That's not literal, but same difference. If, invoking Bush's torture memos there, But it's the same thing here. I mean, doesn't it have to be the case, right? Isn't someone at the State Department saying, sir, we think we might go to prison because it's actually against the law to arm Nazis, to fight Russians, to kill people? And by the way, I mean, we have, even from Amnesty, which is usually just nothing but an adjunct of the State Department itself, has a report about these Nazis committing war crimes in the Donbass, torturing and murdering people, disappearing people, and all of these things. And this is who we're getting in bed with right now. Again, they happily invoke Afghanistan and Syria as the model here. And that just goes to show you our government, and I'm from here too, but it's just true. It's been true my whole life. Our government is as evil as any of our enemies. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah. All right, Scott. Well, that's probably a good place to wrap it up. But yeah, thanks so much for coming back on the show. We'll have to do it again soon. Antiwar.com, the Libertarian Institute, Fool's Errand, and Enough Already, and the Great Ron Paul are your butts. Anywhere else you want to send people?
ScottHorton.org. I got almost 5,700 interviews for you there at ScottHorton.org, going back to this time, 2003, the start of Iraq War II in 2003. And you can sign up for the podcast feed there, iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and all those things. And I'm on youtube.com/Scott Horton Show as well.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, sir.